Paul McCartney might just be our greatest living rock star. He was a friggin' Beatle after all. But even if you're a big fan, there are quite a few things you might not know about it. This is the untold truth of Paul McCartney. It's probably the biggest and most tightly held misconception in rock music history. Yoko Ono broke up the Beatles. She didn't, actually. The Fab Four split up in 1970 due to a combination of divergent creative interests and caving under the pressure of being the biggest band in the world. Ono, a Japanese-American conceptual artist and musician, bore the blame for the breakup because John Lennon fell under her avant-garde spell during the final years of the Beatles. In 2016, McCartney told Rolling Stone, "We were kind of threatened then. She was sitting on the amps while we were recording. Most bands couldn't handle that. We handled it, but not amazingly well, because we were so tight." As he told Howard Stern in 2018,
"She used to sit in on the recording sessions, and we'd never had anything like that. But looking back on it, you think the guy was totally in love with her."
While some uninformed Beatles fans might still blame Ono for the band's demise, it sounds like McCartney is well past all of that. As he explained to Rolling Stone, "These days our relationship is really good, actually." And it seems like he shook off any negative vibes rather quickly. In 1968, he contributed a blurb to the cover of Lennon and Ono's joint album Unfinished Music No. 1, Two Virgins, that read, "When two great saints meet, it is a humbling experience." As McCartney explained to Rolling Stone, "My big awakening was, if John loves this woman, that's gotta be right. I realized any resistance was something I had to overcome. It was a little hard at first. Gradually, we did. Now it's like we're mates. I like Yoko. She's so Yoko." The early 80s saw two of music's biggest superstars, Paul McCartney and Michael Jackson, team up for some duets. Among them, McCartney sang alongside Jackson on The Girl Is Mine, the lead-off single from 1982's Thriller, and Jackson repaid the favor for Say, Say, Say off McCartney's Pipes of Peace. The songs went to number 2 and number 1, respectively, on the Billboard Hot 100. Jackson and McCartney became fast friends, and after Thriller became the best-selling album of all time, they became equals. Shortly thereafter, Jackson reportedly asked McCartney how to deal with his sudden, unbelievable wealth. McCartney's advice? He should invest in music publishing or buy up the rights to as many famous songs as possible. Jackson took that advice to heart and bought a 50% stake in Northern Songs, the publishing company that owned the Beatles catalog. Well, he beat out McCartney for the rights to his own songs. In a 1989 interview, McCartney said he thought Jackson was joking about the whole thing.
He'd say, "I'm going to get your records, you know. I'm going to get your songs. I'm going to buy your songs." And I'd say, "Love it."
As he told David Letterman in 2009.
But we never kind of got to it, and I thought, so we kind of drifted apart. It was no big bust-up. We kind of drifted apart after that.
In its first season, Saturday Night Live, known as NBC's Saturday Night at the time, was about the hottest thing in pop culture. Well, executive producer Lorne Michaels jokingly attempted a huge publicity stunt on a March 1976 episode. He personally and directly pleaded with the Beatles to reunite on his show.
"In my book, the Beatles are the best thing that ever happened to music. It goes even deeper than that. You're not just a musical group, you're a part of us. We grew up with you."
Then came the pitch.
"The National Broadcasting Company has authorized me to offer you a certified check for $3,000.
Of course, the joke is that the Beatles could have named their price to get back together, and they certainly would have asked for a lot more than $3,000. Meanwhile, a few blocks away from NBC's New York studios where Saturday Night aired live, Paul McCartney was hanging out with John Lennon at his apartment in the Dakota Building. They were actually watching SNL and saw Michaels make his offer, and they even considered entertaining it. As McCartney told Charlie Rose,
"We said, come on, should we go? Yeah. It's just down the road." And for half a second, we nearly went.
To think what could have been. Paul McCartney isn't just a singer, songwriter, and bass guitar player. He's also an actor. McCartney played exaggerated versions of himself in A Hard Day's Night and Help, and in 1984, he starred in and wrote Give My Regards to Broad Street. Also, it would seem that McCartney has been offered quite a few notable roles over the years, all of which he declined. In 1967, filmmaker Franco Zeffirelli began production on a big-screen adaptation of Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, and he wanted McCartney to be his Romeo. in conversations with McCartney, the rock star recounted the situation. I said, "I can't do it, man. You're kidding. I'm just a musician." He said, "No, I really know you could do this. You look absolutely how I see Romeo. It would be perfect. Come to Rome and we make a film. It will be beautiful." I bottled out. Maybe that was for the best. Can you imagine him taking on the role of Romeo?
Did my heart love till now? Forswear its sight.
In 2015, Friends casting director Leslie Litt told Huffington Post that she attempted to secure McCartney for the popular sitcom. In the 4th season, Ross was going to marry a British woman named Emily in London. The show really wanted the former Beatle to play Emily's father, a role that eventually went to actor Stephen Waltham. Litt says she inquired through McCartney's manager, but he let her down himself with a faxed letter. As she tells it, he thanked me for my interest and said how flattered he was, but it was a very busy time for him. In the 90s, all 3 then-living Beatles made individual cameos on The Simpsons. After Homer becomes a barbershop quartet superstar, he meets the late George Harrison at a music industry party. Ringo Starr writes Marge a long overdue thank you note for a portrait of him she mailed him decades earlier. And in the 1995 episode, Lisa the Vegetarian, Paul and Linda McCartney encouraged Lisa Simpson to embrace the meat-free lifestyle.
Linda and I both feel strongly about animal rights. In fact, if you play Maybe I'm Amazed backwards, you'll hear a recipe for a really ripping lentil soup.
Paul and Linda McCartney agreed to the cameo on one condition. Lisa's vegetarianism couldn't just be a phase. She had to commit to the diet for the duration of the series. So far, Simpsons writers have kept their word. Paul McCartney is still pushing musical boundaries and challenging himself to try new things. He first experimented with tape loops and trippy effects on the Beatles' Tomorrow Never Knows. In 1993, he started an electronic, music-heavy project called The Firemen, at first anonymously. The group evolved over 3 albums from bleeps and bloops into full-fledged experimental rock. His unlikely partner in the project was Youth, also known as Martin Glover, the bassist in the 80s goth band Killing Joke. Around that time, McCartney and Glover collaborated with the artsy Welsh band Super Furry Animals on an ambient record called Liverpool Sound Collage, and with DJ-producer freelance Hellraiser on the 2005 EDM release Twin Freaks. Those weren't his only collaborations, though. In 2012, McCartney teamed up with Chris Novoselic and Dave Grohl, the surviving members of Nirvana, to record and perform new music. He's clearly not one to rest on his laurels. Paul McCartney may seem like the most innocent Beatle, but he was also the first member of the Fab Four to experiment with drugs.
Have you taken LSD?
About 4 times.
And where did you get it from?
In an August 1964 meeting of the minds, Bob Dylan hung out with the Beatles in a New York hotel and casually offered the Fab Four some marijuana. Dylan evidently thought it was no big deal, since he always thought John Lennon sang "I Get High" in their 1964 hit "I Wanna Hold Your Hand." The lyric is actually "I can't hide," but hey, it would be rude to refuse, so each Beatle tried Dylan's joint. Reportedly, McCartney was the only one blown away by the experience, remarking that, "Marijuana got me thinking for the first time, really thinking." As the Beatles' music got more druggy and experimental as the 60s wore on, marijuana explicitly influenced McCartney's songwriting. In fact, McCartney has this to say about the song "Got to Get You Into My Life." It's actually an ode to pot, like someone else might write an ode to chocolate or a good claret. McCartney remained a loyal consumer of the sticky icky for decades, but he's since given it up. In 2015, he told the Mirror, "I don't do it anymore. Why? The truth is, I don't really want to set an example to my kids and grandkids. It's now a parent thing." He goes on to say, "Instead of smoking a spliff, I'll now have a glass of red wine or a nice margarita. The last time I smoked was a long time ago." The Beatles get all the accolades nowadays, but Paul McCartney has actually fronted 2 enormously successful bands. Sure, Wings wasn't as popular as the Beatles, but what band is? His 70s group still churned out an impressive 14 top 10 hits in the US, including classic rock staples like Band on the Run, Silly Love Songs, and Comin' Up. After some solo efforts in the early 1970s, McCartney decided to form a band, recruiting drummer Denny Seiwell and guitarists Denny Laine and Henry McCullough to form Wings. McCartney's self-taught wife Linda was also in the mix. She played keyboards, despite having no prior professional musical experience.
People would say, what's he doing with his old lady up there,
Quite a gutsy thing to do, really, because she didn't have the experience that you had.
It was a very gutsy thing to do.
Well, Seiwell and Laine were seasoned musicians and reportedly resented Linda's involvement. In Man on the Run, Paul McCartney in the 1970s, Tom Doyle wrote that even in the band's early rehearsals, there were already murmurs of dissent within the ranks over Linda's role in the band. According to the book, McCullough even suggested that McCartney fire and replace his wife, which he resisted. But as Doyle writes, once, in a moment of irritation, McCartney threatened to replace her with former Beatles collaborator Billy Preston. Band on the Run is probably Paul McCartney's best work of the 70s. It's the only Wings album to rate on Rolling Stone's 500 Greatest Albums of All Time list, and it's one of the band's top sellers, probably because it's a hit machine. It produced Let Me Roll It, Hell on Wheels, Jet, and the epic title track. It's a joyful, rollicking record, which belies the peril McCartney and the bandmates endured trying to make the thing. They opted to record at a studio in Lagos, Nigeria. It was monsoon season, and Nigeria was also beset by political instability and high crime rates. One night, Paul and Linda McCartney were mugged on the street, and the bandits stole the initial Band on the Run demo tapes. Then one day, during a recording session, McCartney suddenly collapsed, and his bandmates rushed him to a hospital, believing he'd suffered a heart attack. Then there was the opposition. Afrobeat icon Fela Kuti publicly accused McCartney of stealing and appropriating African music. McCartney cleared that up by inviting Kuti to the studio to hear some tracks. As McCartney explains,
he came round to the studio and I played him all my stuff and he said, no, nothing like it.
Paul and Linda McCartney were relationship goals long before that was ever a thing. First connecting in 1967, the former Linda Eastman was a renowned rock and roll photographer, and she and Paul married in 1969. They were, of course, thick as thieves, playing in Wings and raising children together. According to Rolling Stone, they only spent about 10 nights apart during their entire relationship, the period when Paul was detained in Japan for marijuana possession. Tragically, Linda McCartney died at age 56 from complications relating to breast cancer in April 1998. Her memorial service occurred in early June 1998 at the majestic Church of St. Martin in the Fields in London's Trafalgar Square. More than 700 mourners saluted Linda McCartney by singing hymns and songs, including Blackbird and Let It Be. In the wake of this sad day, a de facto rock reunion took place. George Harrison and Ringo Starr showed up to pay their respects and support their old bandmate. They all sang, which means Linda McCartney's funeral hosted something of a very tender Beatles reunion. In 1999, Paul McCartney was asked,
"Were you putting on a brave front, or did you think she had beaten this disease?"
I was putting on a brave front. Yeah, you got to.
He went on to say,
I was very privileged to have 30 years with a very beautiful, strong, unusual, amazingly talented woman.
check out one of our newest videos right here. Plus, even more grunge videos about your favorite bands are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.